This is the meeting of the Water Supply Planning Committee. It's March 3rd, 2025. I'm calling the meeting to order, and can we do roll call, please?
Yes. Director Lindor?
Here.
Director Edwards?
Here.
Director Edwards is attending as the alternate today. And Chair Paul?
Here. And for the record, our other committee member, Director Anderson, is listening as an attendee today. So let's open this up to public comment first.
Okay. I have John Tilley with his hand raised.
Oh, thank you. I had the same problem with loading the agenda. Just really had to scroll down on it. I think it might have been around how I enabled or did not enable cookies, because I did not enable any, and it just wasn't very functional. I just had to like scroll down to the committee and then click on it like a site. But that's not what I called in. Really, this is the supply committee, and it's really germane to my thoughts these past few days, especially since the January 27th board meeting. And the second half of that meeting with the presentation by the Water Resource Agency, I would just encourage the district to, in some fashion, go about creating more certainty on water supply for the expansion of Pure Water Monterey. And, you know, it needs to be done, I feel like I feel the presentation that came in from WRA really called into question the return on investment that's being contemplated with the expansion. If these waters are only available for a limited amount of time, or even worse, not contractually secured at this point going forward, there's good to, I think, a healthy pursuit to question the investment of the expansion. It's like buying a car that you can't buy gas for, and might be a nice car, but if it doesn't have gas, it's not going to take us very far. Thank you for listening to this, and I do encourage you, though, to pursue a definite discussion around source waters for Pure Water Monterey expansion. I know it's not yours; it really is M1W, but you guys are truly leaders in water on the peninsula, and therefore have that responsibility. Thank you so much. Thanks for all your work.
Good to hear from you, Mr. Tilley. Thought you were gone.
No, I'm around. Feel like we're really getting, towards some conclusions, honestly, in our community, and just looking forward to being healthy for everybody, and at least really bang for the buck. Where are we investing our millions and tens of millions of dollars, and what are we getting in return for it? Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, John. These are all good questions, important to know exactly what we're dealing with the source waters, and we are paying attention, close attention. So thank you. Okay, so any other public comment?
No, Michael Laredo has his hand raised.
Yeah, I'm just trying to let you know I'm here. Apparently, I'm not as a panelist, so I'm going to be able to mute and unmute to interject.
Okay.
I
thought Fran was attending. Sorry.
Can we bring in Michael as a
Yeah, he's on.
panelist?
Thank you.
Okay. Hello, Michael. All right. So we move on to our action items, and the first is the minutes from the November 4th meeting. Any corrections from anyone? Any committee members? Well, if not, I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second. I read them.
Thank you. I did too. Okay. I guess we have to do roll call because this meeting is remote.
Okay. Director Lindor?
Yes.
Director Edwards?
Move approval.
Chair Paul?
Yes.
The minutes are adopted 3-0.
Thank you. Then we have a proposed meeting schedule, the next item. Any issues about that? Any?
Yeah.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I see that there's a finance committee meeting on September 8th at the same exact time. Is that
Oh, what is the other meeting at the same time?
Finance Committee
Finance.
on September 8th?
The FAC, yeah, let me, I think what we meant to do there, Sarah, was avoid Labor Day, but we could have put it on the second Monday instead of the first Monday. So let's just,
Do you want to move either the water supply planning or the
no,
finance committee?
yeah, we would move water supply planning. I just, I think yeah, I see the problem. No, the 8th is a Monday. It just inadvertently says Tuesday.
Right, yeah, it says Tuesday, but I'm just saying there's a Finance Committee meeting
Oh,
on the 8th.
on the 8th, because the third Monday is the 15th.
So maybe the calendar should say September 9 if we're doing it on Tuesday. I bet you that's what you did. You decided to move it to Tuesday and just
Yeah,
didn't change the
September
date.
9th. I bet that makes sense.
Yeah, I see the conflict. Let's, so I guess we have choices then. We could either do September 2nd or the 9th.
Doesn't matter to me.
Why don't we move it, why don't we say the 2nd? Because the issue was the first Monday was the holiday.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so Tuesday, September 2nd for the September meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So apart from that, any other
Yes,
questions or?
I see on the bottom one, January 5th. Did you just put that on there because it just passed? Or should that be 26?
No,
Oh,
sorry. You can just ignore that date.
Okay,
We only schedule for the current year
all right.
for this
So-
committee.
Okay.
so that one is just going to be dropped off?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So we're just scheduling the last meeting for 2025 will be in November then, correct?
Correct. So
Right.
those two changes, Tuesday, September 2nd, and drop the January bottom line.
Good, and thanks for catching that, Director Edwards. Okay, so as with those changes that we've just discussed, is there a motion to adopt the committee meeting schedule?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And we can't do all in favor. I guess we have to, do we have to do roll call on each?
Yes, you
Mike?
should do a roll call on each vote.
That's what I thought. Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Director Edwards,
Approve?
Director Lindor,
Yes.
Chair Paul.
Yes,
The 2025 committee meeting schedule has been adopted 3-0
thank you.
with the
So
proposed change.
for the meat of this meeting, this next discussion item, item 3 on the groundwater divide, I just want to say I've read the materials in the packet carefully, and I understand to an extent, big picture, but not 100%. So I just be forewarned, I'm going to be asking for your help to get complete understanding.
Through the chair, I'd just like to pause this meeting. We do have Amy Anderson has began attending, and that would create a quorum of the full board, which would be in violation of the Brown Act here because it's not noticed. So I
No,
would-
she was planning on participating as an attendee,
Yes,
and I'm trying to move her over now.
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Yeah. So that's what we're doing. Director Anderson is an attendee today.
She's now moved over, Director Anderson is now moved over as an attendee.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, over to you, Dave Stolt and John Lear.
Terrific. And we'll leave this pretty much in John Lear's hands. Although I wrote the staff report, we've been really since 2008, 2009, we've had questions in our mind about the true boundary between the Seaside Basin and the Monterey subarea of the Salinas Basin. It's been projected or asserted that there is a flow divide due to hydrogeologic conditions, as opposed to a physical feature, a geologic feature. And we asked Montgomery and Associates to examine that divide and to better advise us on the differences between, let's call it the political boundary or the drawn boundary of the Seaside Basin to the north and the actual groundwater divide itself. And the conclusions, I bullet pointed what I call the principal conclusions. As you read the memorandum, you'll see that, technically the Paso Robles, which is the upper basin, has a different divide than the Santa Margarita, which is the deeper basin or the deeper aquifer. I've kind of glossed over those subtle differences here and just for purposes of discussion, treat it as if it's a single divide. But the principal conclusion is that recent and previous assertions that there is what we, I guess, call leakage, net outflows, is not exactly true. Now, at our strategic planning session on Friday, Mayor Oglesby, who sits as chair of the Water Master, said, well, that's all nice and good, but you're not going to change the opinion of the Water Master. This is, we'll accept what you say as a second opinion. So here is our second opinion based pretty much in hydrogeology. And that is that there's far less leakage there, or you could say there is no leakage. There is an imaginary set of conditions that can be achieved that would result in some net outflows of water, but they're neither happening on a present basis, and nor are they consistent where you can say, oh, there's a steady rate of flow or a steady outflow or a steady rate of leakage that therefore gives us a target that must be replaced every year, which creates a bit of a conundrum because now we've got the Water Master on one side saying, let's target trying to find 3,600 acre feet of water per year to replenish the basin to achieve protective water levels. And we've got the first stage of a technical memorandum here saying, well, if that target is based on the perception of leakage and you don't really have leakage, then how good is that target? That's not a conclusion of Montgomery, that's a conclusion of your general manager. But I think what we're beginning to see here is that the concept of protective water levels and replacement water is not exact, and it's probably, well, it is overstated. And with that, John, I don't know if you want to add anything or just respond to questions.
I'll just add something short and then respond to questions. And I would say that our consultant, who is a hydrogeologist named Gus Yates, which Dave correctly represented, did a report for us in 2007, back when the Water Master was being formed through the adjudication decision. And as early as 2007, Gus Yates's reports identify this moving boundary that was inconsistent with the jurisdictional boundary. And if we want to, we can get into the history of why the jurisdictional boundary is there. And Gus Yates Montgomery, which is the Water Master's technical consultant, as well as EKI, which is the Marina Coast Water District's technical consultant, all agree on this concept of this moving boundary. So I think it's not just our opinion; it's all the experts that are represented, the different the GSA to our north as well, and we're not. And I would say that it's simple as you're measuring in the wrong spot, and you're not going to get the measurement that you're trying to get to make the decision you want to make. If you measure too far south of the actual boundary, it's going to look like water is entering the seaside groundwater basin. And if you measure too far north, it's going to look like water is leaving the seaside groundwater basin. So the jurisdictional boundary crosses the actual flow boundary, and a portion of it is north of the boundary and a portion of it is south of the boundary. And if you take those two fluxes and add them together, it looks like water is leaving the seaside basin to the north, which you can measure along the jurisdictional boundary, but it's not the correct physical boundary and doesn't represent how the two basins are interacting with each other. That would be as kind of as simple as I could say it.
John, when the jurisdictional boundary was drawn, was it known that, first of all, the flow boundary was variable?
The jurisdictional boundary was drawn the source of the jurisdictional boundary was a United States Geological Survey report from 1982. And it's a Muir 1982. If you hear that, that's the source of that drawn boundary. And it was not represented in that report. That report was based on groundwater level data that was taken in the late 70s and then was written up. And then by the time it had got through Recitin and published, it was in the early 80s. And so by the time we had Gus Yates take a look at this northern boundary again in 2007, there was a lot more data available to characterize it. So it was simply shown that here there is a flow divide here, but by taking a simple snapshot, it's not, you don't have the temporal data to watch it move around.
Mm-hmm. And the modeling, the more recent modeling takes into account the movement and
The
the
more recent,
variability.
yes, the modeling is it's done with a groundwater model that is a bunch of grids, and so the grids you can ask the model to report out which direction the water is flowing, which direction it's leaving each of the grids, and by doing that you can watch this groundwater divide move around depending on pumping. It gets pushed to the north when we have big ASR injection years. As you would imagine, there's more water being put into the seaside basin, and it's pushing that physical boundary away from the seaside basin towards the Salinas Basin. And so the model itself, it's a very hard thing to identify this flow divide through only the groundwater well level data we have, because we don't have a density of it enough to do it. So what you have to do is put that water level into a groundwater flow model as a tool, and then you can track what's actually happening in between the water levels that you can observe, which is fairly common hydrogeologic practice when you're developing understandings of these types of interfaces.
Thank you. I have more questions, but I want to invite my colleagues on the committee to ask their questions. Director Edwards, do you have questions?
Yeah, yes, I do, but you can keep going on, 'cause I'm thinking about something.
Okay. And Director Lindor, do you have questions at this time?
Not
You
at
can-
this time, no. I
Okay.
will interject as I
digest the
Digest.
information. So yeah, it's complex.
Yeah.
All right, here's one of my questions. In the memo, the 3 bullet points, the first 2 are clear to me, but the third is not. So I just don't understand what's being stated here.
Yeah.
in the-
I think if you go to the last diagram of the attachment that has this one with bars.
Got it.
Yeah.
In effect, the memo is saying that the current interpretation or the current understanding of inflows and outflows is likely incorrect and should be reassessed. And that's when he says needs to be reconsidered in light of this, meaning that you can't just take a look at those bars and say, oh my goodness, there's this overall net outflow, because that water really isn't lost. And so it is doing some of its job of providing protective water levels, and it's not disappearing from the scene, so to speak. And so it would behoove us to reconsider our assumptions on that. And then they went on to say,
As in theory, so the last clause, as in theory, there would be 0 flow across an actual flow divide. That's because the water can move in both directions depending on conditions?
I think it's instead of water flowing out of the basin, the flow divide itself moves around and there's no flow across that divide. So
Oh,
which
I
would
see.
have it, but it
Okay,
would have,
that
earlier I
helps.
said that there's one can imagine a set of conditions where there may be some outflow. It's more a matter of if we just continue to put water in the seaside basin, ASR every year, and never pull any of it out, and start to build up the water levels and the head, it will in fact be pushing the flow divide towards the north. So one could construe that it's similar to an outflow, but it's not really gone. It's just moving that ridge of water further north, pushing up
Got
against
it.
right, and
the Salinas Valley water.
the reason that the flow divide is there hydrogeologically is because there's pumping in the Salinas Valley in the Monterey sub area, and there's pumping in the seaside area, but there's no pumping on the Fort Ord area. So it leaves a high of groundwater, just like a mountain ridge would. So if a drop of water falls on one side of the ridge, it goes to Salinas Valley. If it falls on one side, it goes into the seaside groundwater basin. And so that ridge line is moving around in response to pumping. And as Dave stated, if we put more water into the seaside basin and we mounded it up, we would overcome that flow divide. And then in fact, the high point would be the seaside basin and water would be leaving it. But the high point is the actual boundary between the two basins, because there's pumping going on in the seaside basin, depressing groundwater levels.
So any water injected for storage, let's say the ASR water, the pure water Monterey water, operating reserves, all of that. I mean, none of it is lost due to leakage. Is that correct? It's just that
Yeah,
the flow divide boundary moves around.
the flow divide boundary moves around. Now, if we want to use the word leakage, we need to have a definition associated with it. So if leakage means 365 days a year, water is flowing out of the seaside basin like a hole in a bucket, and if that's what you mean by leakage, this is saying that's not happening. And so if you're using a hole in a bucket analogy to say, well, gosh, now that my bucket's draining 50 gallons a year, I got to find 50 gallons more. This memo is saying that's not the correct interpretation of what's going on. But if this memo is also saying you should run these scenarios to see if the raising water levels is going to over during times of high ASR and pure water Monterey and injecting. There's a section in the memo that talks about it may for short periods of time overcome the flow divide. So you may have intermittent things where where you've filled your bathtub up just enough that it's going over the edge of your bathtub, and then and then when it goes down below the ledge, you're not losing water anymore. And so
And
he's saying that could be happening. We don't know if it's happening, but an analysis could tell us if it is.
Mhm.
And so
And
if you're saying that intermittent small amount of water is leakage from one basin to another, I'd say sure, I believe that. But the hole in the bucket, calling that leakage, that's not happening.
does this movement of water impact extraction in any way? Like,
No,
in
no,
our systems?
it would not, because if you go forth with the management strategy that is ASR, which is water in during wet years, water out during dry years, during wet years, you're going to push the flow divide towards and into the Monterey sub area, and I'm using air quotes because it's passing the jurisdictional boundary. You'll push it north of the jurisdictional boundary, but the boundary between the two groundwater basins is the flow divide. So you've just pushed the physical boundary above the jurisdictional boundary, which looks like if you, anyways, now when you start recovering in times of drought, you'll just pull that flow divide back across the jurisdictional boundary.
This is very interesting. Does it, could this affect in any way? I think the answer to my question is no, but could this affect, I mean, people who, the district and anyone else that injects water into the aquifer, that has a certain value. I mean, there's a value attached to that, right?
There is a value attached to it. It depends on, again, kind of the length of time between when you inject the water and when you extract the water. So for Pure Water Monterey base project and Pure Water Monterey expansion, it's envisioned that water is going to go in and come out kind of the same year. If there's enough demand for it. But as the district has adopted the demand scenario that we believe to be true, there would be some buildup of water from Pure Water Monterey expansion as demand is catching back up to it. But when demand caught back up to it and was pulling water out at that rate, there may be some residual left behind due to that lag in source and demand. But I think that's a gradual buildup. The ASR has the potential to put quite a bit of water into the basin that just doesn't get touched for multiple years until it's needed again. And so I think that those longer term times between injection of water, leaving it in the ground, and then pulling it back out has a potential to raise groundwater levels, keep them there until you pull them back out. And if you have more water going into the basin than you have coming out every year, you're going to build up groundwater, whatever you want to call the water.
So does the fact that some of the excess water may stay in the aquifer for a number of years, are there is there an economic dimension that we have to think about? The
Well,
value of that water?
I'll answer the question that you didn't ask, and then I'll let Dave answer the economic question. Um, the the
What's that, John?
well the 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 buildup of the water is of kind of an unquantifiable economic benefit if it does help achieve the protective water levels. But the question that you didn't ask was one of the recommendations of this memo is to do just that, just your question, run analysis that shows the demand scenario with the injection of Pure Water Monterey expansion and the ramp up of the district adopted demand forecast and see the effect on, see what that actually does, how far it gets you to reaching protective water levels, because that work has not been done yet, and that's what this memo proposes to do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just a couple of questions. John, do you think this work that you was mentioning at the end of this should be done?
I think it would answer the question of, is there quantifiable model runs that and of the proposed operations that of the water supply projects, and how they all interact with each other and what effect that has truly on the physical boundary of the seaside basin. I think that work is something that, I mean, the people proposing to do the work are the very experts that the Water Master Board uses. So, I mean, if they're putting out a product that's saying that's happened, it's a step closer than even having to put out a second opinion. It's the opinion of your expert, and how that opinion gets used is not really up to the answers that come out of the model run. So scientifically, yes, I don't know what it does to.
Oh, okay, but here's my question to Mr. Laredo or Fran. If they don't take our opinion, what could we do? We do this work, we come up with this, and what I heard at our planning session, do our word mean anything? Or sitting on that adjudication doesn't mean anything. So, they can do what they want to do. But we've been in the basin since what, 1978 or whatever. So what can we do to say that, okay, this is happening?
Well, I think step one would be to collect the data, and then step two, once we have that data, is determine what path we can try to take forward. The hope is that it supports the position of the parties as we move forward.
Okay, because
If I was going to invite Fran if you have something to add.
Thank you for the opportunity. Before I get there, if I may ask, one of the things, John, I think we need to do is work on definitions. And the reason I say that is, first of all, there are jurisdictional boundaries between the county and the water management district. That's the first distinction. So the county, you have the Water Resources Agency that's managing water in the Salinas Valley and the groundwater basin, a part of which becomes controversial with what we do in the Seaside Basin. So you have those jurisdiction definitions that are important. Then you have the adjudicated Seaside Water Basin, as opposed to the Salinas Valley, which is not adjudicated in any respect, other than trying to figure out what to do with its sustainable groundwater management plan. So that's a distinction that needs to be made. And then there is a distinction in the definitions of the waters that we are talking about. And I appreciate what you said about the flow divide, meaning it's not a physical, there isn't a barrier underneath there, and it depends on who's pumping or who's injecting and maintaining water in the basin. But the boundary moves, and who controls the boundary is important. From our perspective, and Director Edwards hit on this point, the water master, because of the adjudication, is in charge of the seaside groundwater basin. And one of the concerns is this alleged protective water levels that they seem to think we need to be funding. And so making a determination, as John is recommending with the Montgomery study, is good. And I would hope that it points us in the right direction. But as we have seen, their past study that was requested with CalAm demanding the parameters of the study came to a conclusion that the district did object to. And so I think moving this to the next level is appropriate, after which we can see what traction we have with the water master. I think another issue that's a side issue at this point is the fact that the judicial adjudication of the groundwater basin does not match the flow boundaries that we're talking about. When does that get addressed? So I think there are a lot of moving parts to this. The district needs to continue with these professional examinations. I do like the fact that Montgomery Watson is coming up with information that is more supportive of what we have been trying to argue. And the bottom line is it costs us money to continue to inject water in the basin for alleged protective water levels. And so determining what's the appropriate amount for the basin and, all of the scientific information is critically important. So given the history that we have and the need moving forward, the issue isn't going to go away. The water master has already expressed itself as to what it thinks is necessary. So I think this is important information. We just need to be clear. And then I have one question for you, John. When we talk about the flow divide, can you tell me geologically, are the molecules of water from the Seaside Basin different than the molecules of water from the Salinas Basin in this flow divide area?
Not if they, it depends on which aquifer they're in, as Dave said. It probably they're not that chemically different if they're just the same water being pushed around. The water behind the flow divides can be very different because they're different source waters. You would need to check the composition of the dissolved salinity of the waters. You could determine that. That's not been a question that's come up before, so I haven't put a ton of thought into it. As far as what was the water that's in the flow divide and the nature of the flow divide moving around, and it depends on the source of recharge to the water right in that flow divide. Now, has that changed itself out? Has it flown along? It doesn't mean the flow divide means water can't flow across it. It doesn't mean water can't flow along it in the respective groundwater basins. So it could change itself out as well. So it just really depends on the process of how it set itself up and what the chemistry of the sources of recharge are.
And again, from a definitional point of view, is in the Salinas Valley, they refer to their deep aquifer as the 900-foot aquifer. Is that deep aquifer the same as our Santa Margarita aquifer, or are they different?
There was a recent study called the Deep Aquifer Study that they made a definition of what's the deep aquifer, and it had to fit a number of different parameters as far as water chemistry, a confining layer above it, different criterias that fit the definition that they used as the deep aquifer, and their map of the deep aquifer extended the deep aquifer zone south into the Seaside groundwater basin. So hydrogeologically, if by taking that definition, we're saying the Santa Margarita is connected to the deep aquifer zone, and flow is not going across the flow divide that set itself up in the deep aquifer zone. So there's nothing that Dave said it earlier, nothing physical about the geology is stopping the water from flowing. It's just it's the physics of how the groundwater is flowing and the stresses that are pulling the water towards either the Salinas Valley or the Seaside Basin.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have some more questions. Please stay with us, Fran. Would it make sense for Fran and John to work together to develop on the definitions? Or is
Yeah,
that something that John would do with the consultants?
no, we would want You don't want to leave me to hydrogeologists to come up with correct jurisdictional definitions. So yeah, we would need Fran's help.
Okay, so we can
Well,
keep that thought in the back of our minds.
so
I
Chair,
need to catch me up to you. I'm missing a piece to my understanding. Can you explain the nature of the difference of opinion between the water master and the district related to this? I just simply don't have that information. Director Edwards probably does, but I don't. What is the Fran, you mentioned that the water master has made it clear what it thinks is needed. And
Yes,
I've also heard,
and Dave,
so
Dave can answer this. I believe that would be more appropriate.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's multifaceted, but the consultants previously have said, you know, we don't know where the seawater intrusion front is. Is it a mile offshore? Is it a quarter mile offshore? Is it a tenth of a mile offshore? Or is it lurking right next to the shore? But there's been a variety of ongoing discussions that possibly the physical solution offered up by the court decision maybe didn't go far enough, and maybe the natural safe yield is possibly a lower number than where we've landed. And not only that there's still a trough or a depression. So if you continue to pump and that depression remains or exacerbates or gets closer to the ocean, then the hydraulic head of the ocean will be higher than the freshwater head on land, and therefore seawater would start intruding into the freshwater aquifer. So therefore, if we could obtain supplemental water, fresh water, and put it into the seaside basin, then you'd be raising the pressure of the fresh water, the hydraulic head of the fresh water. And that would forestall any seawater ever coming in. So we would never have a salty drinking water aquifer because we've balanced out the pressures and we've kept seawater at bay. At bay, so to speak.
yeah.
And the original work said, hey, if you put injection wells closer to the coast, you would need something like 800 acre feet a year of supplemental water to create protective water levels to keep the seawater intrusion from ever happening. And that same study said, but if you inject further up the hill, i.e. towards General Jim Moore Boulevard, kind of the east side of Seaside, then you will need more water. And that number was like 1,200 acre feet per year to 1,600 acre feet per year. And I'm kind of forgetting exactly what they were. Then with the passage of a few years, this concept of leakage popped in place, and then there was these bar charts saying, hey, there's a net outflow. So not only that, for every gallon we put in, we're losing some. And so if you need 1,600 acre feet,
No.
it's actually higher.
Okay.
And then there was a pumping regime or a scenario looked at that diminished the value of pure water Monterey available. So instead of the 5,750 acre feet per year that we're contractually obligated for, the assumption, I believe, was 4,600 acre feet per year of actual production from the pure water project. It was a very arbitrary number picked out of the air. I know where it came from. And where it came from was you'll do 3,500 acre feet from the base project, but CalAm asked their third-party technical team, how much is the pure water expansion really worth? And they said, in times of drought, it's 0 to 1,100 acre feet. So they took that 1,100 and they said, 3,500 plus 1,100, that's 4,600. Let's only assume 4,600 from Pure Water Monterey, irrespective of the default provisions and the contractual provisions of the contract.
Got it.
So now you have a smaller amount of new water becoming available. And then they also use their urban water management plan demand forecast as representing what the demand forecast would be. Well, we all know that the urban water management plan right off the top had a 400 acre foot error, overstating demand for fire flows. And then we, the district, have contended that they've also double and triple counted legal lots of record and housing starts and people, as if all three use water independently of each other. So the the more conservative scenario that they analyzed decreased the availability of new supply and increased the future demand. So therefore, the amount of water in the Seaside Basin would come under greater stress.
Yeah.
So that resulted in higher numbers needed to maintain the Seaside Basin.
Yeah.
And so
the pieces are
so
the pieces are coming
this,
together.
Yeah, they've landed on this number of 3,600 acre feet per year should do it. So that's kind of how they got there. It's been an increasing number over the last few years, but it's not firmly rooted in any of these modeling results. That being said, the idea was to adopt a target. The Water Master's work was primarily centered around trying to figure out a funding mechanism for, if water was available, how would we pay for water? And that was really kind of the limit of the work. But now the mantra that we're hearing mostly from the Water Master members is, we've really got to solve this problem. We really need 3,600 acre feet a year of new water that we have to go find. And so this memorandum is just the first piece of evidence that maybe that's not the right target. And then there are other pieces of evidence that really need resolution as well. For example, if water is very expensive and surplus water was available, but now you've been told by the technologists that you don't need as much water if you inject it closer to the coast, then a natural follow-up question would be, well, do I need the 3,600 or do I need a lesser number? What would it cost to build the infrastructure to deliver it closer to the coast and use less water versus injecting further up the hill and using more water when water is the expensive item in this equation? So trade-off between capital and cost of water. Again, as if surplus water is available. So nobody's done that analysis. So we don't really know what the trade-offs are between some additional wells with pipelines closer to the coast versus more very expensive water further away from the coast. So that's an item.
Can I add just a point to this, Dave? The protective water levels work was done many years ago, in probably 2009, and there's a lot more data, and some of the protective water levels that have been chosen, when we go back through the historic record, the wells were never at those protective water levels. So there's an opportunity to revisit that as well before making decision, like resharpen your pencil and look at that again. So okay, that's all I wanted to say.
No, that's good. But these are some of the things that remain outstanding. One, how would you pay for water if water were available? Where should you inject that water? And what is the cost of building an injection system? What has been stated on more than one occasion by the Water Master's technical advisor is, oh, that infrastructure's already been built because there's injection sites at the Pure Water Monterey injection field, and there are injection sites at Aquifer Storage and Recovery. The problems are the potential sources of new surplus water, let's say from a desalination plant, will be potable water. So you can't inject those under the Pure Water Monterey injection well permits, because that is recycled water, which is considered to be a waste discharge, actually. So you can't just assume that there's injection capacity available there. But furthermore, no one's ever asked Monterey One Water about those injection wells, or the district about its ASR wells, whether there is in fact surplus injection capacity available. If you start loading up on water injecting in the Pure Water Monterey injection field, you can accelerate the travel time of that water, and you could violate our time limit, roughly 4 months, what we're looking for between a production well, a source well, and the injection well. So there's all these other kinds of questions that have not actually been answered by the Water Master, which would have an enormous impact on how much water, where, and then, another very simple question is, if the Pure Water expansion is delivering what it's supposed to do, and all of Pure Water now being injected is the 5,750 acre feet per year, and we know demand can't grow fast enough to immediately use that water up, so it is surplus beginning year one, how much surplus expansion water will be contractually delivered to Cal-Am that they have to buy anyway? And if there's no demand to offset it, then Cal-Am either A, banks it in the ground, or B, pulls it out of the ground and leaves other water in the ground. But you can't use more water than there's demand for. So until demand catches up to this new source of supply, it's actually a surplus building up in the Seaside Basin. Nobody has done any modeling work on that one to say, well, what contribution to protective water levels will the Pure Water expansion deliver in the early years, even if the intent is in later years, in years 15 through 20, you might start tapping some of that stored water. So then you have this issue of, I built up stored water. When it was surplus, I'm starting to take stored water away. It's Cal-Am's stored water. They have the right to deliver it to customers. So if customer demand does eventually grow 5 years, 15 years, 25 years, whatever it is down the line, they are entitled to that stored water. Well, that would take away from protective water levels, but it would do so in the future. Well, no one's looked at that situation either. So there are a lot of different moving parts here on the Seaside Basin. So when we, as a group, you as directors, but when we said, I think we need to elevate the Seaside Basin discussion to a strategic goal of the district, that's part of the reason why. we've got to start resolving a lot of these moving parts. And if it just becomes us rendering our second opinion, as John said, it's helpful when the second opinion is actually coming from the same modeling team that does the work for the Seaside Water Master.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe that will help it ascend to an equal, a co-equal position as opposed to a second opinion. But anyway, this is what's going on. And I think we at the Water District said, well, we've had this question since 07, 08, 09, and we're getting a clearer picture of it. We have some budget, so we had budget, and so we asked the modelers to look at it. We now have an answer that signals something. They've said there's some additional analysis that can be done, and so I think what we're seeing is we're coalescing behind some Seaside Basin issues that maybe hadn't risen to the same level that they have risen to just here in the last year or two, because those members of the Seaside Water Master, I've heard them on calls say, oh, we need to put together a PowerPoint and go around to all the jurisdictions and tell them we have to go get surplus water. We have to get replenishment supplies. And we need to do this now. And we're over here saying, whoa, not so fast. The assumptions we didn't really approve of for the most conservative, and we're not completely on board with what you're saying. We don't think that there's a leakage problem today. There could be at certain times in the future. But as you heard during our strategic planning workshop, the Water Master in some respects has made up its majority mind, and we're kind of in the minority, even though we've probably got more technical chops than anyone else on that committee.
Okay, well, I really, really appreciate, Dave, you're unpacking this all patiently for me. I think that Director Edwards and Fran probably knew all or most of this, but I was missing a lot of pieces, so I have a much better picture now, and I hope it was helpful for you too, Director Lindor. I just have a couple more questions. First of all, for the district, John, do you attend all the Water Master meetings?
I attend the Water Master board meetings and I chair the Water Master technical committee.
Okay. Can you send me a link so I can find out when the various meetings occur?
Absolutely.
I think that I should start following this.
Matter of fact, one is this week, March the 5th at 2 p.m. at Sand City City Hall.
Thank you.
And I think where we're at as well is our recommendation to this committee is to move this staff report up to the full board so the full board could read it and our public could read it. This is an actual data point. Some of those other things I've said that are currently still unresolved. That's just me banging on a drum, but this is a real data point. This is real information. So we may want to, the board may want to provide staff direction to send a letter to the Water Master solely about this point of this technical memorandum. I think at some point, all of these other little pieces about how do you finance it, where do you inject it, what are the trade-offs, cost benefit between coastal and up the hill, do we or don't we have surplus injection capacity, what's the impact of pure water expansion? These are things that I think possibly we need a second letter at some point to say, somebody should do some analysis here.
Well, Dave, the sooner the better.
Yeah.
So, don't put it off. If you can draw it up.
So this report should go to our board in the March board meeting, and then provide direction to, let's deal with the leakage problem. And as the mayor said, well, you may not change our mind on leakage, but we at least need to transmit the information.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I support your initiative to to start teeing up these important questions and to do the study you're proposing. I just have one more question for Fran. Does the fact that the jurisdictional boundaries and the flow boundaries are not the same, does this question have to go back to the court at some point to, um, I don't know, resolve questions of jurisdiction?
I think my
Is-
response right now would be wait and see, but it's a significant issue when you say who is responsible for what. And I remember, Dave, was it at the last board meeting or the last meeting of this committee where you showed the very thin black line, which was the adjudicated boundary, and how different that was from all of the new information that we have. Well, the adjudication controls through the water master what we do to make the seaside groundwater basin healthy. I mean, that's why it was adjudicated.
Right.
And so that may be an important legal change that needs to be made at the appropriate time, because it may determine what the judge says based on all the technical information. Okay, we're going to change the boundary to reflect what we know now based on our hydrogeologic information. And based on that, then the following changes to the original 2006, 2007 adjudication need to be made. And from our perspective, since the money is coming from Cal-Am ratepayers as the biggest pumper in the seaside groundwater basin within our jurisdictional boundary, we want to make sure that we pay for what we're responsible for, but not something that is not needed. And the irony, by the way, Dave, of where the well should be located is I can go back 30 years and tell you they used to tell us, stop pumping near the coast, move your wells further inland.
Yeah.
And here we are now being told, well, maybe they should be closer to the coast. And I'm thinking of the Oxnard area, and the reason is that is an adjudicated groundwater basin. And the water master there for decades has been trying to develop or secure water sources to provide a barrier at the coastline so that the saltwater intrusion doesn't come further inland. And
Right.
we don't have seawater intrusion. This is a preemptive move in anticipation that if you pump too much at the coastline, you would induce seawater intrusion. So there's a lot that needs to be properly evaluated. And again, this is a step that the district should be taking based on our history for decades. And again, we're very fortunate to have a professional staff and the financial ability to hire outside professional consultants when we need them. So
Yeah.
Thank you
What
very
your
much.
point about moving away from the coast versus coming into the coast? It's a out versus in. If you're taking water out, you want to move your wells away from the coast. If you're putting water in, you want to move them closer to the coast. And so in the Ed Gonder situation, the S&G situation, it was perceived as a benefit for Cal-Am to pick up SNG's water and deliver it to the hotel site, because the hotel site was sitting right on the dunes of the beach, and we didn't want Gonder pulling that much water to serve the hotel straight from a well on the beach. So, we moved his point of extraction to a Cal-Am well, which would be like La Playa or Plumas or one of the seaside wells. And then they used their distribution system to bring it back and serve the hotel rooms. Totally made sense. And it keeps the, the potential for harm down. But you know, Orange County, they have a whole series of injection wells close to the coast to create a, you know, seawater intrusion.
Mhm.
So you're going to bring your study proposal to the full board.
Yeah, I
And-
think what we'll do is bring it in March. If the board so directs, we'll send a letter highlighting this information to the water master, and then we'll try to budget some money for next fiscal year to do some of the work suggested by Montgomery and Associates to follow up on this stuff.
Good.
And Dave, could by April, could you put together that second memo that you were talking about, the things that we should be looking at? I think a water master need that guidance.
Yeah.
I need that guidance to give to them. So they may take it, they may not take it, but at least we put it out there.
Yeah.
Ask the questions that need to be asked.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think when you sit on Watermaster and you get a summary from their technical team that says, oh, this is what our experts have told you before, and I've summarized it for you. Not all the dots have been clearly connected in some of those summaries.
Yes.
And so you'll even see things like the suggestion of, here's a map showing potential injection well sites near the coast. And by the way, we need 3,600 acre feet per year. And how we got to that number from the first study that made some recommendations based on the well sites near the coast, you can't follow that map. That map's not been laid out clearly for you in some of the summaries you've received at the Watermaster. So I think that second memo might help, or I'm hopeful that we can clarify a few of those intermediate steps.
Yeah, it would probably give us that roadmap that we're looking for.
Yeah.
And I believe we're looking for one because we're about to go out publicly, and there's a lot more work needs to be done than going out. After 19 years of Watermaster, here comes some answers. And how are we going to fund this? I believe what Fran just said about the ratepayers. I think that's our responsibility to be looking out for the ratepayers. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Any more comments, Director Edwards?
No. Good.
Well, thank you, and
here.
I'm glad you prepared this proposal, and glad of your experience and expertise, yours and Fran's, on all of this. So I think if there are no more questions,
if it's appropriate, Chair, there were two things I wanted to just get in the record on this discussion that I thought would fit well and all in one spot. One of the things that we didn't agree with on the CalAm modeling scenario was when the payback to the Seaside Basin started and how it was tied to the desal plant. And so that was a major thing that that when you reduce the demand and you say you need another source, and then you point to the desal plant, and then CalAm says, and at that point in time, I can start repaying the Seaside Basin, where we don't see it quite that way. If you have excess water, you can start paying it back, especially if your demand is low. So that was one of the reasons we didn't agree with those. And the second point is related to the jurisdictional boundaries. When and if those are started to be addressed and adjusted, we will need to work with the Monterey GSA, and as well as Department of Water Resources at the state level. Everybody needs to agree and adjust those boundaries.
And take it to the court with the agreement of all those.
I don't know the
parties.
steps, but if we change our boundary with the court, it's going to affect how Monterey it gets affected by Sigma, and a bunch of dominoes will start falling. So it's good to start talking to everybody in those that's affected by that.
And one more from me, Chair.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave, can we look at I think I was reading in here and you were talking about Marina Coastal want to put some water into the basin.
Yep.
And we started looking at that agreement, or could y'all come up with an agreement so we can propose it? It can run through the water master and water can be going into the basin sometime.
Yeah, I told my counterpart at Marina Coast to ping me in about 8 weeks, and I told him that about 5 weeks ago, but I won't be ready in 3 weeks. So, but yeah, we want to do a draft agreement. We clearly have the right because the courts assured us in the adjudication itself that the district can store and remove water from the basin, but we'll want to do it consistent with storage and recovery agreement with the water master. So
right.
Yeah.
And that way,
and we'll do all that. I don't think it'll be ready in a month, but
no,
yeah,
just something that we can start working on, and
Yeah, the issue for us helping Marina Coast out is we do have injection capacity from June through November. But rehabbing and wear and tear and getting compensated for some of that depreciation or the wear and tear, there's some financial aspects of it that I haven't really thought through yet.
okay.
Yeah.
Just long so they can know we're working on trying to get some water into the basin.
Yeah.
Right now.
And one of the poorly understood things is water that's in the basin on a temporary basis is still beneficial. And so while we say at some point we may have to tap the Pure Water Monterey operating reserve, well, the goal is to never have to tap it. I mean, you would have to have a severe plant outage. So let's assume that doesn't happen for a decade. We're already at 2,200 acre feet of stored water. We're going to cap out at about 3,700 acre feet of stored water. And remember, one of the scenarios that had been looked at was, 1,200 acre feet per year for 10 years. Well, we've already got 2 years worth just sitting there, and we'll have 3 years worth. So it has an impact. And then if Marina Coast starts putting water in now for which they have no use, no demand. And let's take, for example, the city of Monterey's Fort Ord allocation, which I think is 60 acre feet. If Marina Coast was actually producing that 60 acre feet and putting it in the ground every year, and Monterey doesn't build anything in the old Fort Ord for 20 years, well, you've just done another good deed for the basin. So having Marina Coast say, well, eventually I'm going to come get the water, that's fine. But front loading it has a benefit. So
would Director Edwards, should we put this question of the Marina Coast injecting water on the agenda for a future Water Supply Planning Committee meeting?
Yes, that's all I was asking.
Yeah, that's my goal.
Okay. And let's do that. And I'd like to suggest moving on to our last item, which is topics for future meetings, committee meetings. I'd like to suggest that we
actually sidestepped item 4.
Oh.
But it's a short one anyway.
Oh.
My
It's on back of the page.
Yeah.
On back of the agenda.
And that's just we have made an offer to the water master about posting their meeting videos. So about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, we wanted to see a meeting video. We got hold of it. Then the next month, I asked for the video. Laura Paxton said, oh, the videos are just for our own purposes for doing minutes, and we don't post them for viewership. And then I came back with a follow-up and I said, well, you have a new website. If you want to start posting them, that would be great. But the district would happily create a subfolder in our YouTube website and we would post them on their behalf. Please take this to your board. So since Alvin's our representative there, he knows that we've made the ask. I don't know that Laura is going to bring it up to the whole board and put it on the agenda. I didn't see it on the March 5th agenda, so it would.
Are the board meetings subject to the Brown Act?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to bring it up at the 5th and see what the chair, what the board want to do. If they want to authorize it, or do they want to agendize it and talk about it, or whatever. So.
Yep. But they could put it on their own website if they want to retain control and independence. And the way they would do that, they could, frankly, they could call Sarah and she could give them a tutorial, because we post all of our meeting videos.
I give them that option too.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I don't think anybody look at the Water Master website. I know they.
Whoa.
I haven't.
Well,
But I should. I
as
will.
you well know.
It's not the easiest to follow or to find.
No.
That's why I mentioned ours. It's a lot more easier and it's updated. So.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay, is that it for number 4?
Yes.
On the agenda? Okay, and then we have an update on this cease and desist order timeline.
Isn't that water demand?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
am
I
I
just
doing
want to,
here?
well,
No,
I think I gave a little bit of flavor during our
I don't know
workshop, but
what's going on.
yeah, we,
I think
it is and it isn't. It's water supply related as well. So we're trying to, we have an emergency response plan for the Pure Water Monterey project. It involves some calculations as to how Cal-Am can produce water. Well, suffice to say, Cal-Am does not yet have its 2 new bayonet wells built, and we're eyeballing that schedule very closely because we may not be able to inject the Pure Water Monterey expansion water in the newly constructed wells, injection wells 5 and 6, until their extraction wells 1 and 2 are available. And if in fact that's the case, and Cal-Am doesn't move quickly enough, then we're going to have a brand shiny new expansion project that we might not be able to deliver all the water that we're contractually obligated to deliver. So we're trying to sort out whose project is the critical path project, and it looks like it's Cal-Am's production wells, and what impact that'll have we'll discover later. So that's, but if we can't deliver everything November of this year and it has to roll over to December, January, February, that changes our timeline in what we're telling the state relative to the cease and desist order. So it's just a heads up that we need about 5 things to all fall into place together. And one of them is we need a clearer picture of when that end date is. Otherwise, I can't go to Sacramento and say, here's the target month, the target day. So best laid plans, we're trying to make sure they remain good plans.
Workable, yeah. All right, well, keep us posted on that, please. Okay, so now items for future agendas, in addition to the one we just talked about that Director Edwards raised, I'd like to suggest for a future meeting to talk about source waters. I know we've, Dave, you mentioned at a board meeting that you intend to prepare like a one pager or frequently asked questions type of you know, to answer these questions that keep getting asked and answered over and over and over again, which sounds like a good idea. But in addition to that, I thought we could start to, in the last discussion at the board about source waters, you know, you mentioned some things that sounded to me like uh, elements of a plan B in case certain sources became unavailable like 20 years from now or 15 years from now, or some of the ones that are contractual or subject to weather variations or whatever. So I'm thinking it may be a good idea to think ahead and how we would manage if certain source waters became unavailable in the future. And you know, I leave it to you to decide how much time you need to think about that and come back to us. So I'm not saying it has to be necessarily at the next committee meeting, but I think that would make sense for us to
Well,
to
Chair Paul, let me say this. I think it's after this one, it's time to put a close on those source waters. They keep coming up, and we're starting to bring it up more than what we should. We unsigned the contract. They're either going to show up or they're not going to show up, and then they're going to be sued. So Dave and talk to his counterpart next door. It's just time for us to put a stop on the source water.
So you don't
Yep.
think we need to have a plan B for if certain
I'm not saying we don't need a plan B. If Dave could come up with one, that'd be fine. But I'm not going to push him because we'll start talking about source water. The public will start thinking, oh, is a problem with source water. The district signed the contract, and now Fran want to speak on that. Go ahead.
Please.
I do, because Director, if I may, Director Paul made a suggestion to have the general manager for Monterey One Water do a presentation to our board, which is publicized through our meetings, because what is important, and I've heard him do this presentation, is trying to explain to people, you know, we have, I believe it's 14 sources of water. And literally he and his engineers are evaluating almost on a daily basis of what is available and what will be used. So to think that this is your typical source water where we have two sources of supply and we can't extract this one during these months, but we can extract it. That's not how it operates. And I think people need to understand, and only Mr. Shudo is the one who can do this presentation, to explain exactly what he and his engineers are doing literally on a daily basis and have produced successfully since the plant went into operation. It's not something that we can do. I don't see.
Well, it will be, because Paul and I have agreed to put together a memorandum together. It's the question has been asked and answered multiple times.
Right.
And Paul giving us a presentation is not going to help when another letter gets sent to unsolicited to the State Water Board, as it already has. The county's letter was sent to our deputy director, our regulator, by Jeff Davey, Citizen of the Year, Jeff Davey, to call into question the source waters. So even the lifting of the CDO is going to have this shadow that we have to be able to answer. And so we're not going to, you know, trot out the video of Paul giving a verbal. We need a technical memorandum, and we need a two-part technical memorandum. We need one that, if it takes 3 to 5 pages, we'll do that. But we need an FAQs style, which basically says, you know, 2 simple questions. Are the source waters available? Yes. Are the source waters secure? Yes. See technical memorandum. But we need to produce that document. We need to produce a document that says Aquifer storage and recovery is not 410 acre feet per year, but it's 1,210. We need a technical memorandum that says the pure water expansion is never 0 to 1,100 acre feet in a drought and can't be. And where that testimony came from was in error. And so this is all part of the background information that we're going to have, but we have to address the source water issue basically for the 5th time in a clear, concise fashion.
Dave, I understand your frustration because you and Paul have answered the questions over and over and over again. And then the memos you're suggesting would, and the FAQ, that they would be very helpful. But you have to also consider there are 2 new board members. And I think it's important to demonstrate that the board knows this stuff and has seriously considered the
Yep.
issues and is knowledgeable enough to make a informed judgment. And I do think that a presentation by Paul Shudo might accomplish that, educate the 2 new board members and demonstrate to the public that the board pays attention, takes it seriously, has looked at it closely.
Yeah, we just
So
can't do that until we've got the document to back it up. I'm more than happy to have Paul come speak, but it will be forgotten or challenged the next day. I mean, you know, you heard John Tilley at the outset of this meeting and his letter to the editor of the weekly last week, which said the same thing. And we've got 2 coalitions in the Salinas Valley who are sending letters very similar. So yes, I agree that a presentation is good, but it will, the question will not get resolved with one more presentation because it's so easy for the detractors to then say, well,
We just
that's
got to
the
put
truth.
closure. We
Yeah.
just got to put closure on it. We got it because, you know, one word permanent made a big stink. So, you
Yeah.
know, just time to close it off. And if we don't close it off, who will close it off? So
well, the thing is,
and-
we're gonna have to argue this for the state, to the State Water Board to get the
That's-
CDO lifted. So
That's
this
the
is,
key.
so we have to be ready for that. And I mean, I know we have all the information we need, but you know, we have to have that argument, that conversation with the Water Board.
Yeah, but
So,
Ara actually raised a couple of spins on the source water issue that were a little different than what we've testified to in the past. And so we're kind of, Paul's considering whether or not they actually ask their attorneys to do a more formal legal opinion on all of the different source waters. Some are subject to water rights, some are subject to contracts, some are subject to bipartisan agreement. So we're still kind of assessing the best way to go about defending those 14 sources. Before they did a water right by water right evaluation that their attorneys assisted in writing, but it was not a legal opinion. And you know, we have an opinion, for example, that there was no limit placed on the water rights that we jointly applied for and secured. So 3 years ago, there was a letter that said, oh, well, that water right was okay for the base project, but it's not available for the expansion. And we're like, where does it say that? We could have made the base project 5,000 acre feet. Instead, it was 3,500, but the remainder of the unused water rights still available. So we have to look at some of these again and say, well, what is the point, or what's the threat? Because in that particular instance, the threat was you only get to use as much as the base project needs, and you don't get to take anything for the expansion. We fundamentally don't see eye to eye on that issue. And there's other things. So we have to kind of go back into each of these again and look at how it's being portrayed again. And
Beyond what was already done for Paul's testimony?
yeah.
Yeah? Okay, well, sorry, but
It's
I understand, I mean, I understand, Director Edwards, you're saying that we just have to put a closure on it, but it's all gonna be open before the State Water Board, and I think it's important
And I
also
agree
to,
with you. It's just that publicly, we keep talking about, you know, the county talked about it.
yeah,
And then now everybody else talked about it. Now we are starting to dig into it. Now he made an
But-
agreement, and that's the agreement we're gonna live by, and everybody gonna cry. Well, you need to look at the source water. You need to look at, we don't looked at them.
well, we do need to, for the two new directors to come up to speed on this issue, you know, that,
Oh, okay. One more time. We can do it if you feel satisfied, but it got to stop. That's my point. It just got to stop. So
well, we can't stop the people who keep saying there's a problem with the source.
Yes, we can. We can say we talked about it. We talked about it. That's it. Now they can demand to put it on the agenda again if they want to, but then let us not keep going at it.
So you don't think
That's
we
my
should have
point.
this on the agenda of a future committee meeting?
Yeah, if it comes up, we could have it on there. But it just comes to the point that you just got to stop talking about it. They're going to talk about it. You got people out there going to bring it up every chance they got. But as
Right.
far as I'm concerned, we signed the agreement with Next Door to produce water. If they don't, we're going to sue them, point blank. So, you know, we can bring it up again, but it just got to stop. You know, the source waters are there. They made an agreement. We made an agreement with Monterey One Water. They made an agreement with us. Whoever don't show up, be in default, and it's going to be some suits. If I'm still around, so y'all better hope it's done 2 years after I'm gone, or a year after. So, you know, that's just my saying. But good meeting now. I'm glad you brought it up, but it just got to stop.
I know, it's very aggravating, but.
That's right. We don't do ourselves any favor. We bring it up too. All right.
Any further questions or comments or suggestions for future meetings? If not, we adjourned.
I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a
Thanks
good
to all of you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.